Formatted novel, 2 sentences per paragraph, original English retained. When the 30-second call was hung up, I was standing in the base's underground parking garage. The phone screen was cold white and the call history was filled with the name Elena Carter from top to bottom. Every single call either marked missed or hung up in 3 seconds. I stared at that string of red notifications and suddenly let out a laugh. 5 years of marriage, 7 years with the system, and in the end, all that remained were 32 calls that couldn't get through. I sent her one last message. Elena, the Sky Dome system cannot go online tonight. Marcus changed the underlying permissions and the security audit didn't pass. It's not too late for you to reply to me now. Within 10 seconds of sending the message, a reply popped up on the screen. Not from Elena, but from Marcus using her work account. Lieutenant Colonel Noah, Colonel Carter is in a meeting. Please do not let personal emotions interfere with the base's major decisions. I stared at those words. Lieutenant Colonel Noah, he never called me chief system designer, nor head of the Skydome project, and certainly never Elena's husband. In Marcus's eyes, I was just a technical officer who stayed within the system thanks to Elena. Someone who could be replaced at any time. I didn't call again. I took a screenshot of the 32 calls, of Marcus's reply, and of the log showing my back-end permissions being forcibly switched, and sent all of them to my private encrypted email. Then I picked up my laptop bag and stepped into the elevator. As the doors closed, the mirror reflected my face. 31 years old, dark circles under my eyes and coffee stains on the cuffs of my service uniform from last night's late-night system debugging. Back when the Ether system was initiated, there were only 12 people at the base. At that time, Elena wasn't yet Colonel Carter. She wore an old military uniform shirt in the temporary command post and said to me, "Noah, you handle the technical architecture and I'll take charge of command and coordination. When the system is complete, we'll stand at the top together." I believed her. I wrote the system framework for her, built the data links, and stayed up through the toughest nights before budget approvals. Later, the Ether actually came to fruition, and she did stand at the top while I was gradually pushed into a corner by that adjutant named Marcus standing by her side. As the elevator reached the top floor command center, the conference room was brightly lit. Today was the Joint Command Demonstration for Ether System 3.0, a system crucial to the base's strategic deployment for the next 3 years, and also tied to NATO's €2 billion joint defense contract. Just as I arrived at the conference room door, Chen Rue from the tech team rushed over, pale-faced, and whispered, "Brother Noah, you're finally here. Adjutant Marcus replaced your security module with his own demo module." I asked, "Who approved that?" Chen Rue glanced toward the conference room, "Colonel Carter." I looked through the glass door. Elena sat at the head of the table in a deep blue military uniform with colonel's rank insignia, impeccably made up, wearing a cold expression. Marcus stood in front of the screen, holding a laser pointer, narrating the core advantages of Ether System 3.0 on the large screen. The position of project lead boldly displayed the name, Marcus Brent. My name had been moved to the last page, Technical Support, Lieutenant Colonel Noah White, in type so small it was nearly illegible. I pushed the door open. Marcus saw me and smiled. "Lieutenant Colonel Noah is here. Perfect. Later, when the generals from the Joint Command ask about the underlying details, you can fill in. Today is the formal demonstration, so please don't bring up your conservative opinions. They'd shake everyone's confidence." The meeting room fell silent for half a second, and several generals looked at me. Elena frowned. "Noah, you're late." I placed my laptop on the table. I made 32 phone calls. A flicker of impatience crossed her eyes. "I'm in a meeting." Marcus said, "You kept calling. Are you upset about the project credit adjustment?" Before I could speak, Marcus immediately continued, "Colonel Carter, I've already reassured Lieutenant Colonel Noah. He might feel that after working for years on the foundational architecture, now that the project has entered its operational deployment phase, he finds it hard to accept that the lead role has been given to me." "Can't accept it." I stared at the results on the screen that belonged to me, listening to him drag my name through the mud. I didn't argue. I opened my computer and cast the screen. "It's not about the credit." On the screen popped up the back-end permission change records. At 23:47 last night, Marcus used Colonel Carter's authorized account to replace verification module of the Sky Dome system. I clicked to the second page. The new module hasn't passed the joint security audit, hasn't undergone stress testing, and has no disaster recovery backup. It was forced online today. The demo environment might hold up, but once connected to the live environment, it will completely collapse. Marcus's face shifted slightly. He immediately stepped forward to block the screen. Lieutenant Colonel Noah, technical route disagreements are normal. Don't create panic in the Joint Command. I didn't look at him. I continued to open the email records. 3 days ago, I had sent a major risk alert addressed to Elena Carter with copies to the legal team and the technical team. The email title on the screen was clear. Major risk notification before Sky Dome System 3.0 launch. Sent at 2:17 a.m. status, read. Elena's expression changed slightly. I didn't miss the shift in her demeanor. I clicked open the back-end operation logs. Because Marcus used your permissions to archive this email. Murmurs of discussion rose in the conference room. Marcus immediately spoke up. Elena, you get hundreds of emails a day. I was just helping you filter them. The archived ones are just technical disputes, not major decision-making risks. He called her Elena in the Joint Command. Elena didn't correct him. She just looked at me, lowering her voice. Noah, let's finish the demo first. The project can't stop because of a personal conflict between you and Marcus. Personal conflict? I looked at him and suddenly felt exhausted. I pulled a document from my laptop bag and placed it in front of him. This is my transfer request. The conference room fell silent instantly. Elena stood up abruptly. Noah White, what do you mean by this? I said calmly, exactly what it says. Since I'm just technical support, my transfer won't affect Colonel Carter's Joint Command meeting. Marcus couldn't hide the smile in his eyes. Lieutenant Colonel Noah, you can transfer, but all base materials and system permissions must be fully handed over. Don't bring personal emotions into military assets. I looked at him. Of course, I won't take anything from the base. I paused, but what belongs to me, I'll take back one piece at a time. I turned and left. The moment the door closed, the conference room's big screen flickered, then the demo system went black, and the entire room erupted in gasps. My phone vibrated. Claire Zhao from the NATO Joint Defense Bureau sent a message. Mr. Noah, an annual salary of €800,000 plus project shares. The contract is valid until 2400 hours tonight. Have you made your decision? I looked at the message. This time, I didn't hesitate. I accept. After sending it, I took off my base ID badge and placed it on the front desk. Behind me, someone in the conference room called my name. I didn't look back. The Sky Dome system demo crashed. Within 10 minutes, the tech team was in chaos. Chen Rui called me 3 times. I answered the first one, his voice trembling. Brother Noah, the main service won't start. Colonel Marcus wants you to go to the server room immediately and restore it. I asked, who is the current project lead now? There was a few seconds of silence on the other end. Then Chen Rui said quietly, the big screen says Marcus Brent. I said, then go find Marcus. Chen Rui panicked, but he doesn't know how. He can't even find the login entry point. I pressed the elevator button. The project lead enjoys the credit and bears the consequences. With that, I hung up just as the elevator doors were closing. Elena chased after me. She was wearing combat boots, her face cold. Noah White, if the project has another problem, you'll be transferred now. I looked at her. I sent an email 3 days ago, submitted a written notice last night, and made 32 calls today. Colonel Carter, you didn't listen to a single one. Her brow furrowed tightly. Are you forcing me to bow down in front of the Joint Command? I held my phone up to her, scrolling through the call log page by page. Am I forcing you to bow down, or am I saving your project? She glanced at it, her expression stiffening slightly. Marcus hurried over. Elena, the generals are all waiting for you. Lieutenant Colonel Noah is emotionally unstable right now. Don't let him set the pace. Elena withdrew her gaze. She didn't ask why I had made so many calls, nor why Marcus had hung up on her behalf. She only said, Noah, go back and restore the system first. We'll talk about things when we get home. Home. Hearing that word, my chest tightened. It had been a long time since we had gone home like a married couple. She was busy liaising with NATO, attending high-level cocktail parties, and showing up at various events with Marcus. I was busy fixing the system, patching vulnerabilities, and cleaning up the mess she couldn't see. We lived in the same officer's apartment, but it felt like 2 temporary roommates. I put my phone away. Colonel Carter, let's talk work during work hours. I'll cooperate with the transfer process. For system issues, please contact the current project lead. The elevator doors closed, and Elena's face was shut out. I went to the base's personnel department. Personnel Director Hammond was already waiting there. He pushed a handover checklist toward me. Lieutenant Colonel Noah, since you requested a transfer, complete all handovers by 18:00 today. Computer, access card, code repository, system permissions, project documents, not a single item missing. I glanced at the checklist. The last item read, transfer of all intellectual property rights related to the Aegis system. I smiled. Who told you to add this? Hammond said expressionlessly, Staff Officer Marcus. I placed the checklist back on the desk. Have legal come. Hammond frowned, internal base handovers don't require legal for every detail. You're a veteran here. Don't make things ugly. I looked at him. When it involves personal patents and military technology licensing, it has to go through legal. Hammond froze for a moment. Personal patents? Marcus' voice came from outside the door, Noah White. That's enough. He entered with 2 administrative staff, his face dark. The base has supported you for 7 years. You've drawn a high salary, enjoyed the benefits of being a colonel's husband, and now you're transferring out and you want to claim the base's core system as your personal asset. I turned on my phone and placed the recording on the desk. Say that again. Marcus' expression shifted slightly and Hammond instinctively glanced at the recording interface. I pulled an old file folder from my computer bag containing patent application receipts from 7 years ago. Transfer records of server costs I had paid out of my own personal account and the technical licensing agreement signed before the project kicked off. I spread them out one by one on the desk. First, the initial version of the Aegis system existed before it was registered at the base. Second, the base's early servers and testing environment were financed by me personally. Third, Colonel Carter personally signed an agreement. The base has military usage rights, but not permanent ownership. Fourth, the modules I added during this period were licensed to the base under the agreement. But the license is contingent on my continued role as the core maintenance lead in ensuring the system is not tampered with by unauthorized personnel. I looked up at Marcus. Your replacement of the underlying modules last night using Colonel Carter's permissions has already triggered the license risk clause. Hammond's face turned completely pale. Marcus sneered, who are you trying to scare with a few old documents? The project has grown to this scale. Do you think NATO leadership will care? I nodded, then let NATO leadership see. I sent scanned copies of the documents to Susie Yuan, the head of the legal team, and CC'd the base commander. The email subject was simple, formal notice of personal license agreement and risk clause for the Aegis system. 3 minutes later, Susie Yuan rushed into the personnel office. The first thing he said as he entered was, who told you to include intellectual property transfer in the handover checklist? Hammond turned white, and Marcus's expression soured. Susie Yuan picked up the checklist, glanced at it, and directly tore off the last page. This item is invalid. Without legal review, no one can demand Lieutenant Colonel Noah to transfer personal patents. Marcus said in a low voice, Legal Sue, the system has collapsed now. NATO's contract is about to go sideways, and you're still talking about procedures. Susie Yuan looked at him coldly. Precisely because things are going sideways, we need to follow procedures. Otherwise, who takes the blame in the end? Marcus was silenced. My phone buzzed again. Claire Jo had sent the electronic contract. An annual salary of 800,000 euros, a signing bonus of 200,000, and project shares to be negotiated separately. Position, Chief System Architect for the NATO Joint Defense Agency. I stared at the title, my fingers pausing for 2 seconds. At the base, I had been the real chief architect for 7 years, but in the base's internal directory, my title had always been Senior Engineer, Technical Support Group, because Elena had said, Noah, you're my husband. A high-ranking position might make the command think I'm practicing nepotism. I understood her then. Now I realize she wasn't afraid of the higher-ups misunderstanding. She was afraid of everyone knowing that the base's real technical backbone wasn't Elena Carter, but me. Noah White. I signed the electronic contract. After signing, I shut down my computer. Marcus stared at me, then suddenly laughed. You're really leaving, Noah White. Once you leave the base, no one will recognize you. Those outside institutions are looking at Colonel Carter's reputation, not you. I looked up at him. Is that so? I turned my phone screen toward him. The NATO Joint Defense Agency contract page was crystal clear. An annual salary of €800,000, position of chief system architect. Marcus' smile froze on his face. Hammond gasped. Soo-Yuan looked at the contract and remained silent for a long time. Suddenly, someone rushed in from the doorway. The commander's secretary. His face was pale. Legal Officer Su, the NATO representatives have arrived. They demand an immediate explanation for the system crash. Marcus turned to leave, but at the door, he looked back at me. Noah White, don't get too cocky. You came from this base. If you dare to go to the NATO Joint Defense Agency, you'll be violating the military confidentiality agreement. I picked up another document, confidentiality agreement. Staff Officer Marcus, have you forgotten? Back then, Colonel Carter, to save money, didn't sign a confidentiality compensation agreement for the technical team. Marcus' face stiffened. I handed the document to Soo-Yuan. Legal can confirm. Soo-Yuan took it, glanced at it, and nodded. Lieutenant Colonel Noah has no non-compete restrictions. Everyone at the office doorway fell silent. I picked up my laptop bag and walked out. Behind me, the angry voice of the NATO representative echoed from the conference room. You can't even name the person in charge of your core system, and you still expect us to sign a €2 billion contract. I didn't stop walking. As the elevator doors closed, I saw Marcus panic for the first time. When I got home, the living room light was on. Elena hadn't returned. On the coffee table lay a dinner invitation. Tonight was the Carter family's monthly gathering. Mrs. Carter loved these occasions. At the dinner table, she would compare everyone's military ranks, positions, and connections. Over the past 5 years, I had always been the most embarrassing one because my mother-in-law had always felt I wasn't good enough for Elena. I took off my coat, walked into the study, and began packing my things. Computer, hard drives, paper agreements, technical notes. I didn't touch the watch Elena had given me. Nor did I take any valuables from the apartment. The apartment was under her name. She had said back then, Noah, I'll apply for the apartment. Don't stress about it. Later, Mrs. Carter said in front of relatives, good thing the apartment is under my daughter's name. Otherwise, some men would try to split the property the moment they divorce. I heard that day, but I didn't argue because back then, I still believed marriage wasn't proven by property deeds. Now I know those who don't argue aren't seen as generous in others' eyes, but as easy to push around. At 7:30 p.m., Elena called me and I answered. Her voice was cold. Where are you? The apartment. Family dinner tonight. Come over. I put the last hard drive into my bag. Not going. There was a 2-second silence on the other end. Noah White, you made a scene at the base today, and now you won't even come to the family dinner. My mom already knows about the project going wrong. You at least need to come and explain. I said, the project lead is Marcus. He should be the one to explain. Elena suppressed her anger. Do you have to talk like that? I leaned against the desk. Elena, I've been talking normally all day. Have you listened to a single word? On the other end of the line, Marcus's voice came faintly. Elena, your aunt is getting impatient. I laughed. He's going too. Elena's tone was unnatural. Marcus handled the NATO matter for the base today. Mom asked him to join dinner and discuss a response plan. I asked, then what am I going for? She was silent. I answered for her, to be the target. Let your mom scold me a few times, make Marcus look more composed, and give you a way out in front of the relatives. Elena's voice turned cold. Noah White, when did you become so bitter? I looked at the photo on the table, taken right after we got married, her leaning on my shoulder with a bright smile. I turned the frame face down. Starting from the 30-second call that got hung up, I hung up. 10 minutes later, Elena sent a message, if you don't come, you'll face the consequences. I didn't reply. I called a moving company. At 8:30 p.m. I moved my belongings out of the apartment. When I was loading the last box, Mrs. Carter called. I answered, and before I could even speak, she launched a torrent of abuse. Noah White, you've gotten bold, haven't you? My daughter gives you food and shelter, and you're pulling a stunt like this at the base. If a man can't even do his job, and then throws a tantrum on top of it, isn't that shameful? I sealed the box and said, Auntie, I've already been transferred. She sneered, transferred? Where do you think you can go after leaving the base? Everyone knows you only got where you are because of Elena. Now that the project runs into trouble, you run. Typical. A man from a poor family has no sense of responsibility. My tone was calm. I'm not from a poor family. I'm an orphan. Mrs. Carter choked for a moment, then became more acerbic. No wonder nobody taught you. I stopped what I was doing. The movers all looked over. I didn't get angry. I opened a recording app and said, "Go on." Mrs. Carter didn't realize I was recording and continued her tirade. Don't think I don't see through you. You're just jealous of Marcus. He's a graduate of a top university, comes from a military family, and knows how to help Elena share the burden. And you? You're holed up in the computer room all day like a computer repair guy. I pushed the last box to the mover and asked, "Anything else?" Mrs. Carter snorted coldly. "You must come to the base tonight and apologize to Elena and Marcus. Otherwise, don't think you'll be setting foot in the Carter family's door again." I said, as a matter of fact, I wasn't planning to. I hung up the phone and saved the recording. At 9 p.m., I checked into a hotel. Just as I finished the check-in process, Claire Jo messaged me, "Mr. Noah, NATO has received the contract. Is it convenient for you to come to headquarters for an onboarding meeting tomorrow at 9:00 a.m.? I replied, "Yes." She added, "In addition, people from the base were inquiring discreetly in the industry tonight about whether you violated the non-disclosure agreement. Our legal team is ready to respond." Looking at the message, I felt, for the first time, like I was being treated normally, not as someone's husband, not as someone's appendage, but as Noah White. At 10:30 p.m., Elena came to the hotel in person. She stood at the door of my room, her gaze heavy. I didn't let her in. She looked past me at the suitcase behind me, stunned for a moment. "You really moved out?" I nodded. "Yeah." She took a deep breath. "I can overlook what happened today. You come back to the base tomorrow and stabilize the NATO project first. As for the credit and the position, I'll have someone reassess it." I looked at her and said, "It's not about whether you overlook it or not. It's that I'm not going back." Her brow furrowed. "Don't be so impulsive. How much is the NATO Joint Defense Authority offering you? I can have the base match it." I said, 800,000 euros. The color drained from her face in an instant. For that moment, she finally lost her colonel's calm. As if she had been slapped across the face. 800,000? I nodded. Annual salary, not including the signing bonus or project profit share. She stared at me, her voice tight. "When did you contact NATO?" I said, "They contacted me 3 times. I turned them down the first 2 times. Why did you say yes the 3rd time?" I looked into her eyes. "Because on the 32nd call, you still didn't pick up." Elena's eyelashes fluttered. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. The elevator chimed. Marcus stepped out, clearly not expecting me to open the door, nor Elena standing at the entrance. He was still holding a bag of medicine. "Elena, I was afraid your stomach might hurt, so I brought you some medicine." Then he looked at me, a victorious challenge in his eyes. "Lieutenant Colonel Noah is here, too." I ignored him. Pulling out a document and handing it to Elena, a divorce agreement. Elena's face went completely pale. The smile on Marcus's lips froze. I said, "Tomorrow at 10 a.m., I'll have my lawyer contact you." Elena stared at the agreement, her voice hoarse. "Noah White, are you giving up our marriage just for a position?" I looked at her. "It's not for a position." Before closing the door, I said one last thing. "It's because I finally saw clearly in your eyes, I wasn't even worth a single phone call." The door shut, and the hallway was silent for a long time. Half a minute later, I heard Elena ask Marcus in a low voice, "Were you the one who hung up those 32 calls today?" Marcus didn't answer. The next morning at 9 a.m., I walked into the NATO Joint Defense Bureau headquarters. The receptionist didn't make me wait or ask if I was there for an interview or to see someone. She stood up directly, "Mr. Noah, Claire Jo is already waiting for you in the conference room." I nodded. The door at the end of the hallway opened and Claire Jo stood inside. She was in her 30s with short hair, a gray suit, and sharp eyes. Without any pleasantries, she slid a project file in front of me. "Mr. Noah, NATO wants to hire you, not because you came out of the base and not to poach from the base." She tapped the file. "We've studied your publicly available technical achievements over the past 7 years and checked the early patent ownership of the Sky Dome system. The 800,000 is an A markup. It's our valuation of your abilities." The words were ordinary, but my fingers paused for a moment. In 7 years at the base, no one had ever said that. They said I was lucky to marry Elena Carter, that I could stay up late and was suited for low-level technical work, that I was too quiet to stand in the spotlight. Even Elena said, "Noah, don't worry about fame. I know you're important and that's enough." But she knew, yet she never let anyone else know. I opened the contract. "I have a few conditions." Claire Jean nodded. "Go ahead." "First, I will not take any military secrets from the base." "Of course." "Second, my personal patents and historical authorization issues will be handled by myself and NATO will not intervene." "Agreed." "Third, the position and project authority NATO grants me must be written into the contract, not just verbally promised." Claire Jean smiled slightly. "That's exactly what we want." She flipped the contract to the last page where it was already written. Noah White, Chief System Architect of the NATO Joint Defense Bureau with final review authority over the underlying architecture of the new generation Starshield platform. I picked up the pen and signed. After signing, she extended her hand. "Welcome to NATO." I shook her hand. "Looking forward to working together." Just then, my phone vibrated wildly. It was Chen Rue calling. I answered and he lowered his voice as if hiding in a stairwell. "Brother Noah, the base is blown up." I asked. "What happened?" "NATO representatives have suspended cooperation. The commander demands a full investigation into the accident. Marcus says you left a back door before your transfer. And now the legal and security teams are checking your computer." I wasn't surprised at all. Marcus would do this. He can't admit he messed with the system. So, he has to pin the blame on me. I said, "Let them check." Chen Rue panicked. "But Hammond just had someone look at your computer and even try to use your account to access the code repository." I said, "They won't get in." "Why?" "Because during yesterday afternoon's handover, I already submitted a written request to freeze my personal account and asked the legal department to witness it." Suzy Yuan signed off. Chen Rue was stunned for a few seconds. "So, if they mess with your account now, it's a violation?" "Yes." The chaotic sound of footsteps came from the other end of the line. Chen Rue lowered his voice. "Brother Noah, Colonel Carter is here." I didn't say anything. A few seconds later, I heard Elena's voice not directed at me, but coming from the tech team's office. Cold enough to tremble. "Who told you to touch Noah White's computer?" Hammond explained quietly. "Staff Officer Marcus said to check for a back door." Elena's voice rose. "Did legal approve it?" No one answered. Then came Marcus's voice. "Elena, this isn't the time to worry about procedures. NATO wants results, and if we don't clear up whether Noah White has any issues, the commander won't let it go." Elena was silent for a moment. "Fine, check it, but follow the procedure." Marcus was clearly impatient. "He's already been poached by NATO and you're still protecting him." The air went still. The next second, Elena's voice rang out. "What did you say?" Marcus paused. Chen Rue held his breath. Someone whispered, "Colonel Carter, Lieutenant Colonel Noah." "No, Mr. Noah has already reported to the NATO Joint Defense Bureau this morning. I heard his annual salary is 800,000 euros. The sound of documents hitting the floor came through the phone. Elena seemed to have misheard. "How much?" The voice was even quieter. 800,000. The call was suddenly cut off. I stared at the black screen and put the phone back on the table. Claire Shaw glanced at me. "Need to handle it?" I shook my head. "No, let them settle the accounts themselves first." At 12 o'clock noon, the base officially sent me a lawyer's letter. Long in content, but the core was just one sentence. They suspected me of taking the core technology of the base and demanded that I stop joining NATO and cooperate with the investigation. After reading it, I directly forwarded it to my lawyer, Lin Jing. Lin Jing replied quickly, "We have sufficient evidence. We can send a counter letter." Half an hour later, my lawyer's letter was sent back to the base. First, demanding that the base stop defamation. Second, demanding that the base immediately seal Marcus's operation logs. Third, demanding that the base explain the facts of 32 calls being hung up, emails being archived, and permissions being tampered with. Fourth, demanding that the base confirm within 2 working days whether they will continue to fulfill the Sky Dome System Authorization Agreement. If not confirmed, I would legally initiate the authorization termination process. After sending it, I turned off my phone and started reviewing NATO's new project materials. I no longer wanted to be held back by the base's mess. At 3 p.m., Chen Rue sent me a secretly recorded video. In the footage, Elena stood in the center of the technical team, her face pale, holding a printed call log. She asked, "Why didn't my phone ring for the 32 calls Noah White made to me yesterday?" No one in the office dared to speak. She turned to Marcus. "Do you have an explanation?" Marcus finally lost his composure. "Elena, I was just afraid he would disrupt your meeting." Elena's hands were trembling. "So you hung up 32 calls for me?" Marcus quickly explained. "At the time, I thought he was throwing a tantrum. He's been unhappy about me taking over the project, and I was worried he would sabotage the joint command meeting." Elena looked at him, her voice shaking. "Did you know he was calling to warn me that the system couldn't go live?" Marcus fell silent. At that moment, a technician spoke quietly. "Colonel Carter, Lieutenant Colonel Noah didn't just call. He also sent 2 risk emails, both of which were filed by Major Marcus." Elena whipped around. "What else?" Chen Rue, standing behind the crowd, said softly but clearly, "And last night, Noah's back-end access was revoked on Major Marcus's orders." The screen shook for a moment as Elena steadied herself against the nearby table, as if she suddenly couldn't stand. A second later, her voice hoarse, she asked, "Before he was transferred, did he try to find me?" Chen Rue paused for 2 seconds. 32 times. The entire tech team fell into a deathly silence. The video ended there. I saved it. A few seconds later, Elena called me. It was her first call of the day. I stared at the screen and didn't answer. The ringing stopped. Then she called again, and I still didn't pick up. On the third call, I answered. Her breathing was ragged on the other end. "Noah, I just found out." I cut her off. "Colonel Carter, for work-related matters, contact my lawyer. For personal matters, contact the divorce lawyer." She choked back a sob, and after a long pause, she said, "I want to see you." I said, "I don't." I hung up. Outside the window, the sun was shining brightly. In the NATO conference room, Claire Jo was discussing the new system architecture with her team. I opened my laptop and connected to the projector. For the first time in a conference room where everyone waited to hear me speak, no one called me Lieutenant Colonel Noah. No one made me stand on the last page, and no one hung up the phone for me. Elena truly broke down the next afternoon. I went back to the base not for her, but because legal counsel Susie Yuan informed me that the transfer sealed documents required my personal confirmation. When I arrived at the base, the receptionist looked at me with a complicated expression. Before, they would casually call me Lieutenant Colonel Noah when they saw me. Now they stood up and said politely, "Mr. Noah, legal counsel Sue is in conference room 3. I nodded and walked toward the meeting area. Just as I reached the corridor, I heard a loud crash from the tech team side. The glass door was pushed open and Elena stormed into the office. She usually valued dignity above all, even suppressing her voice when angry, but this time she was almost shouting. "My husband was poached with an $800,000 annual salary. Why didn't anyone tell me?" The entire tech team fell silent instantly. Dozens of eyes fixed on her. Marcus stood by his workstation, pale-faced. Hammond was also there, holding a disciplinary report. Elena slammed the report onto the table. "Noah, why transferred? Join NATO? 800,000 annual salary?" The commander knew, and I, his wife, was the last to find out. No one dared to answer. Her gaze swept across the tech team. "Chen Rue, you tell me." Chen Rue stood up, his face white, and glanced in my direction. Elena followed his gaze and turned around. She saw me. In that moment, panic flickered in her eyes, but she didn't walk over. She seemed to finally realize that uncovering the truth was more important now. Chen Rue lowered his head. His voice very soft, "Colonel Carter, Brother Noah came to see you before he was transferred." Elena stared at him. "When? How did he reach you?" Chen Rue gritted his teeth. 32 phone calls. Elena's face slowly turned pale. Chen Rue continued. "He made 32 calls. All of them were hung up by your adjutant." The air conditioning in the office seemed to stop. Elena spun around to look at Marcus. "You hung them up." Marcus's lips moved slightly. "Elena," at the time Elena cut him off directly. I asked, "Did you hang them up or not?" Marcus fell silent. The silence was the answer. Elena looked as if all her strength had been drained. She stepped back, her hand bracing against the corner of a nearby desk. But on that corner lay a stack of documents. She knocked them off, and they scattered across the floor with a rustle. She swayed with the movement and collapsed into the chair. No one from the technical team dared to move. Standing in the hallway, I didn't go over to help her. She looked down at the papers on the floor. Among them were the printed copies of the risk alert email I had sent 3 days ago, the written notice I had submitted before my transfer, the procedure form requesting the account freeze, and the screenshot of the NATO onboarding announcement. Elena picked them up one by one. By the time she reached the last one, her hands were trembling so much she could barely hold them. Then she looked up at me. "Noah." I didn't respond. Susie Yuan came out of the meeting room and stood beside me. "Mr. Noah, the sealing procedures are ready." I nodded. When Elena heard the words Mr. Noah, her eyes flickered again. She had always disliked others calling me Mr. Noah before, saying it felt too distant. But in these 5 years at the base, she had never allowed anyone to call me Colonel Carter's husband either. The position she gave me was always stuck in between. Neither a close partner nor a key contributor, just a useful, quiet technical tool that never competed. I walked into meeting room 3. Susie Yuan slid the sealing checklist toward me. "This is the file directory you submitted yesterday. The base now requires verification to ensure no confidential materials were taken out." I flipped through it. "Fine." Marcus followed into the meeting room, his expression having recovered somewhat. "Noah White, don't act so innocent. You joined NATO too quickly. Who knows if you've been colluding with them all along, deliberately causing the system to crash right before the joint command meeting." I turned on my recorder. "Adjutant Marcus, please continue." His face darkened. I laid 3 documents flat on the center of the table. First, the system crash occurred after my account was frozen. Second, the person who replaced the security module was you. Third, I sent a risk warning and you filed it away. I then pulled up the permission logs. You used Colonel Carter's authorization account to replace the module at 2347. At 1:12 a.m., you deleted my rollback script entry. At 9 a.m. before the demonstration, you had operations revoke my emergency maintenance permissions. I looked at him. Now you say I deliberately caused the system to crash. You want everyone to believe that someone already stripped of your access rights destroyed the system from afar. Susie Yuan's face turned grim. Elena stood at the door, her fingers clenching tightly after hearing those words. Marcus tried to speak again. I pulled out the last piece of evidence. "This is the message you sent to the NATO representative last night." Marcus's expression changed instantly. Elena whipped around to look at him. "What message?" I opened the screenshot sent by Marcus to the NATO representative. "Noah White has been reassigned. I am now fully in charge of Aegis. Rest assured, I will thoroughly clean up any instability left behind by the old tech team." The atmosphere in the conference room dropped sharply. Susie Yuan picked up his phone. "Call compliance immediately." Elena stepped forward, her voice hoarse and unrecognizable. "Marcus Brent, did you send this?" Marcus broke out in a sweat on his forehead. "I was just trying to stabilize the client." "Stabilize the client?" Elena let out a laugh. Her eyes were red, but her smile was cold. "You drove away the real architect, ruined the security modules, ignored his 32 calls, and then told NATO you'd clean him up." Marcus panicked. "Elena, I did it for you. You can't keep living in Noah White's shadow. The commander always thought the base relied on him. I just wanted to help you take back control." Elena froze. Those words cut through her like a knife, piercing her deepest secret. Everyone in the conference room watched her. She didn't immediately refute it. I wasn't surprised either. Over these past 5 years, I'd vaguely sensed it. She needed me, but was afraid of others knowing it. So she hid me away in the tech team in the late hours. On the last page of the credits, Marcus simply turned the thought she dared not voice into a blade, and she had stayed silent for too long. I stood up. "The file handover is complete." I put down my pen. "The rest is your internal base matter." Elena suddenly reached out to stop me. "Noah, I'm sorry." I looked at her. "For which one?" She hesitated. I said, "Sorry for ignoring those 32 calls, or sorry for cutting my name from the credit line? Sorry for letting Marcus call you, Elena, or sorry for every time your mother scolded me for being uncivilized and you never spoke up for me?" Elena's face drained of all color. She opened her mouth, but couldn't get a single word out. I walked past her and out of the conference room. Behind me, Marcus was taken away by compliance for questioning, while Elena stood still, not chasing after me. This time, she finally understood. Some calls, once hung up, can never be made again. After leaving the base, I didn't go back to the hotel. I went to the law firm. Lin Jing had already prepared the documents, and he pushed a thick stack of materials toward me, the Aegis System Authorization Agreement. I've rechecked it. Marcus Blunt arbitrarily tampered with the underlying modules, removed your maintenance permissions, and made unauthorized external commitments, all of which have triggered the risk clauses. I flipped to the last page, the authorization termination notice. My eyes lingered on those words, and my finger paused. Lin Jing asked, "Sure you want to send it?" I nodded. "Send it." He warned me. Once it's sent, the base will be in a tough spot. The Aegis system's current military usage rights will enter a disputed status, and the NATO contract will basically be lost. Elena Carter will come to you. I said, "She already has." How did you respond? I didn't. Lin Jing looked at me for 2 seconds, then chuckled. You're finally acting like a real person. I looked up at him. He spread his hands. Back then, you weren't like a husband or a partner. You were like the base's free firefighter. Wherever there was trouble, you'd put it out, and then people would still complain about the smoke. I didn't argue because he was right. At 5 p.m., the authorization termination notice was officially sent to the base commander, the legal team, and Elena Carter's personal email. 3 minutes after it was sent, Elena called. I didn't answer. She called again. I still didn't answer. On the 6th call, I picked up. Her voice was hoarse on the other end. Noah, what does authorization termination mean? I replied, calm and flat, exactly what it says. The Sky system cannot be shut down now. NATO has already requested a re-demonstration. If authorization enters into dispute, the base will be held accountable. This is not my fault. After a few seconds of silence, she said in a low voice, I know. It was the first time she had admitted it, but it was too late. She added, I've already revoked all of Marcus's permissions. The base will investigate him. Can you postpone the termination? Just give me 3 days, and I'll get to the bottom of this. I looked out the window. 3 days ago, I gave you a chance. Her breath caught on the other end of the line. I continued, that risk email was sent 3 days ago. She could no longer speak. I hung up the phone. Lin Jing pushed the second document over, the divorce agreement. Should I send it alone? I picked it up and read through it. The property settlement during the marriage was straightforward. The apartment was Elena's premarital acquisition. So, it belonged to her, and I didn't claim a share. However, the base's early loans, my personal advances, and my patent licensing revenue needed to be settled independently. Lin Jing said, you can forego the marital home, but you can't give up the technical revenue you're entitled to. Don't play the saint again. I signed it. I wouldn't take her things, but I wouldn't let her take mine for free, either. At 7 p.m., Elena appeared downstairs at the law firm. She didn't bring Marcus. She stood alone at the entrance, wearing a black coat, her face pale. When I came downstairs, she walked quickly toward me. Noah, let's talk. I stopped. The lawyers are all upstairs. Her eyes reddened. I want to talk to you alone. I looked at her. There's nothing left between us that can't be discussed through lawyers. Her fingers tightened around her bag strap. I know you hate me, but I really didn't know Marcus was the one who hung up those 32 calls. If I had known, I cut her off. If you had known, would you have answered? She froze. I said, Elena Carter, the problem isn't that Marcus hung up the calls. The problem is that he dared to because he knew you wouldn't blame him. Tears instantly fell from her eyes. I continued. He dared to delete my emails because he knew you'd rather believe he was sharing your burden. He dared to remove my name because he knew you were also afraid of me stepping into the spotlight. He dared to call you Elena because you never set clear boundaries. Her face turned deathly pale. He and I never going to bed isn't the only form of betrayal. I looked at her. You gave him your trust and you gave me suspicion. That's enough. She stood frozen in place. After a long moment, her voice was barely a whisper. I'm just too tired. The pressure from the base is overwhelming. Liaising with NATO, budget joint deployments, everything is crushing me. Marcus has been handling a lot of things for me outside. I thought he was helping me. I nodded. So I don't blame you. She looked up at me. What? Your stress is real. His scheming is real and your misjudgment is real. I handed her the divorce papers, but my leaving is also real. Elena didn't take them. She looked at the papers as if they were a knife. Do we really have to go this far? I said, we reached that point long ago. I just signed the papers today. At that moment, Lin Jing came downstairs and handed me a courier receipt. The authorization termination letter has been received by the base. The commander requests an emergency meeting tomorrow morning and invites you to attend for an explanation. Elena snapped her head toward me. I took the receipt. Her voice trembled. Noah, tomorrow's commander meeting, do you have to go all the way? I looked at her. It's not that I want to go all the way, I said before turning to get into the car. It's that you pushed me to a point where only documents can speak. The car door closed, and Elena stood under the streetlight, still clutching the divorce papers she hadn't accepted. At 9 a.m. the next day, the base's emergency commander meeting convened. I arrived on time with my lawyer. The moment I pushed open the conference room door, everyone's eyes were on me. Before, they saw me as the silent man behind Elena Carter. This time, they saw me as the one who can decide whether the Aegis system continues to operate. I sat down, placed the authorization termination letter in the center of the table, and the conference room fell into dead silence. I've been to the base command center's meeting room many times before. Back then, I sat closest to the door, and when technical details were needed, Elena would say, Noah, please elaborate. After I finished, I'd quietly sit back down. Today, I'm sitting directly across from the commander, with lawyer Lin Jing on my left and legal advisor Suzy Yuan on my right. Elena is in the main seat, looking terrible. Marcus is also here. His seat has been moved to the back row, but his eyes still hold a sense of defiance. Brigadier General Williams, the commander, gets straight to the point. Mr. Noah, the base acknowledges there were communication issues during the project handover. However, the Skydome system is vital to the base's strategic interests, and I hope you'll consider postponing the termination of authorization. I nod. We can talk about it. A spark of hope lights up in Elena's eyes. I push a document across the table. First, the base needs to publicly correct the information about the lead for the Skydome System 3.0 project and restore my historical contribution credits. Several people in the room frown. I continue. Second, the base must formally explain the cause of the accident to the NATO representatives, and not blame the system crash on the departing technical team. Marcus's face turns even more sour. Third, the base should cooperate with the investigation into Marcus Brandt's unauthorized operations, email interceptions, and fraudulent external commitments made under false pretenses. Elena nods. I can agree to those. I look at her. Fourth, the base needs to recalculate the patent licensing revenue and project bonuses from the past 5 years. A general immediately interjects, Mr. Noah, isn't that going too far? You received military pay while at the base. I chuckle slightly. I received military pay because I was serving. The licensing revenue is because you used my patents to generate strategic value. These two things shouldn't be conflated. Lin Jing projects an account sheet onto the screen. Over the past 5 years, the Skydome system helped the base secure 6 strategic cooperation projects. In the external promotional materials, the ownership of the core technology was deliberately blurred. On the bonus distribution list, Marcus had received 2 special contribution awards. In the past 2 months, while I hadn't received a single one. Murmurs arise in the meeting room. I open the second page. This is the bonus approval form. Approver, Elena Carter. Beneficiary, Marcus Brandt. Notes, core contributor to the practical deployment and advancement of the Skydome system. I look at Elena. Colonel Carter, when you approved this payout, did you know who actually built the Skydome system? Elena's face turns pale. She opens her mouth to speak. At the time, I thought it was a strategic advancement bonus. Marcus immediately jumps in. Of course it was for strategic advancement. I coordinated with NATO and pushed forward the Joint Command demonstration. What's wrong with that? I open a third document. Then why did you present underlying architecture optimization as your own work in the briefing slides? The screen shows a comparison of 2 versions of a PowerPoint presentation. The first is the technical team's original draft, Noah White, listed as the lead for the overall project architecture. The second is the version Marcus submitted to the command, Marcus Brandt, as the lead, with the original author's information deleted. The modification timestamp, 10:19 p.m. on the night before the Joint Command meeting. The modification account, Marcus Brent. The meeting room falls into complete silence. Marcus's face is ashen. I was just standardizing the format. I nod. Standardizing it by removing my name. He clenches his teeth. Noah White, don't act so offended. Isn't this just because Colonel Carter never publicly acknowledged your husband's status, so you're making a big deal out of it now? I'm not angry. I played the last recording. What he said in the conference room yesterday. The commander has always thought the base relies on him. I just wanted to help you take back the initiative. The recording ended and everyone in the conference room looked at Elena. Her face turned pale. Marcus was completely panicked. The recording, I said, from the first time you falsely accused me of taking base secrets, I've recorded every conversation with you. I then pulled up the call log. 32 calls with timestamps, durations, and how they were ended, followed by screenshots of Marcus replying to me using Elena's work number. This is the reason for my reassignment. I looked at all the generals. I didn't just walk out suddenly. I made calls, sent emails, and gave written notices. Your person in charge chose to hang up, archive, suspend permissions, and impersonate me online. Now that the system has crashed and contracts are damaged, you're asking me to unconditionally put out the fire. Brigadier General Williams looked grim. He turned to Elena. Colonel Carter, were you aware of these matters? Elena was silent for a long time. I knew about the project credit adjustment. I looked at her. She continued. I didn't know about the 32 calls or the emails being archived or the permissions being suspended. I asked, and the bonus? Her fingertips trembled. The bonus, I approved it. The conference room fell into dead silence. I didn't say another word. Some answers were enough. Brigadier General Williams slammed the table hard. Marcus Brent, you are suspended pending investigation. Hammond, HR will work with legal to seal all operation records. Marcus stood up abruptly. General, you can't do this. Without me, who will communicate with NATO? I looked at him. The person NATO most wants to talk to right now is not you. As the words fell, the conference room door was knocked on and the secretary pushed in. General, the NATO representatives have arrived. They are requesting to meet with the true chief architect of the Aegis system. Everyone looked at me. Elena also looked at me, a plea in her eyes. I closed my laptop. I can meet them. A glimmer of hope lit up in her eyes. I continued, but I represent the NATO Joint Defense Bureau, not the base. Elena's face instantly drained of color. Half an hour later, the NATO representatives entered the conference room. They recognized me immediately. Claire Jo, the lead representative, walked straight up to me. Mr. Noah, we have seen the risk warnings you sent to the base. Unfortunately, they were not adopted. Marcus's face turned ashen. Claire Jo turned to Elena. Colonel Carter, NATO is suspending cooperation with the base. At the same time, we will reassess the internal plans of the NATO Joint Defense Bureau. These words hit like a hammer and the generals' faces all changed. Elena sat there, her shoulders trembling slightly. Marcus tried to rush over to explain but was stopped by the guards. I stood up and Claire Jo extended her hand. Mr. Noah, we look forward to future cooperation. I shook her hand. Before leaving the conference room, Elena suddenly called out to me. Noah, I paused. Her voice was hoarse. If I had answered that call back then, would things have been different? I didn't turn around. It wasn't one call, I said. It was 32 calls. After the base commander meeting, Marcus was suspended, but he didn't give up. Early the next morning, an anonymous post appeared on the military internet with a glaring headline. Base Colonel Carter's husband defects to NATO, suspected of taking core technology, damaging a $2 billion strategic project. The post didn't use my full name, but keywords like Colonel's husband, core architect, NATO, and $800,000 recruitment fee were enough for the military to guess who it was. The comments section was lively. Some called me ungrateful, others said I climbed the ranks through my wife and now bite the hand that fed me by siding with NATO. And some remarked, a man who lives off his wife eventually won't even carry the pot. After reading it, I only saved the web page as evidence. Claire Jo walked into the office and placed a tablet in front of me. Need NATO to issue a statement. I shook my head. Not yet. She raised an eyebrow. You can really take it. I said, it's not about taking it, it's about letting him leave more traces. At 10 a.m. Lin Jing called. Found it. The source of the post is linked to Marcus Brent's private encrypted email. Even though he used a relay account, the traces are obvious. I said, secure the evidence first. At 11 a.m. Elena also saw the post. She messaged me, it wasn't me. I replied with 4 words, I know. She quickly added, I'll handle it. I didn't respond further. At noon, the base issued a statement. Very brief. First, Lieutenant Colonel Noah White's transfer process was legal and compliant. Second, the base never determined that Lieutenant Colonel Noah White took military secrets. Third, regarding the project incident, the base is investigating internal management responsibilities. Within half an hour of the statement, Marcus struck back. He posted a lengthy article from his personal account. He said that in his years at the base, he had witnessed me using my status as Elena's husband to monopolize technical resources while refusing to bear strategic pressure. He said, the Aegis system wasn't my sole achievement, but the collective result of the entire base. He said I deliberately created panic before my transfer to force Elena to submit, then defected to NATO. His final line was harsh, some men treat marriage as a stepping stone, package silence as grievance, and are just waiting for the chance to stab you in the back. This long post spread quickly. Elena's call came in immediately, and I answered. Her voice was tense. Don't look at that stuff online. I've already had the Judge Advocate General's office handle it. I said, no need. Why? Because the more he speaks, the more complete the evidence becomes. Elena fell silent. I continued, you should first look into the old accounts within the base. She was confused. What old accounts? I sent her a spreadsheet. Over the past 2 years, Marcus had applied for 9 bonuses, 3 consultation fees, and 2 external collaboration kickbacks under the name Aegis Strategic Advancement. Her signature was on every step of the approval chain. The line went dead for a moment. I said, if you don't want things to get uglier for the base, investigate it yourself. At 3 p.m., Elena led a team to seal off Marcus's office. She finally began flipping through the files she'd never bothered to read before, Chen Rui later told me. That day, Elena sat in Marcus's office for a full 4 hours. She dug out a pile of old materials. Draft scripts for the Aegis System 2.0 joint press release originally included my name but had it removed in the final version. The annual bonus recommendation form for the technical team ranked me first in the original draft yet downgraded me to standard performance in the approved copy. Meeting minutes from the project kickoff initially read Noah White suggests delaying the launch, but the version submitted to headquarters was rewritten as the technical team has confirmed readiness for launch. What hit harder was a chat record Marcus saved with Mrs. Carter. Mrs. Carter had asked, Elena can't always let that Noah guy take the credit. When a man has talent, he tends to get restless. Marcus replied, don't worry, Auntie. I'll help Elena keep a firm grip on power at the base. Mrs. Carter responded, you're sensible. Men like Noah White with no background should be grateful just to have a meal. Don't let him climb above Elena. When Elena saw that, she smashed her cup that evening. She came to the NATO headquarters building, but I didn't go down. She messaged me. I found the chat logs between my mom and Marcus. I replied, She said again, I'm sorry. I didn't respond. She added, I really didn't know they talked about you like that behind your back. I stared at the screen, my fingers pausing for a long time. Finally, I only replied, it's not that you didn't know they looked down on me. You just never thought it mattered before. This time, she didn't reply again. The next day, Lin Jing formally sued Marcus Brandt on charges including defamation, military slander, falsification of project contributions, and suspected embezzlement of base bonuses. At the same time, I authorized the lawyer to submit an old account settlement letter to the base. The letter covered the past 5 years of technical license revenue, project bonuses, personal advances, and reputational damage caused by tampered credits, all itemized and totaling €376 million. The base's top management was shaken. Elena personally emailed me, I will push the base to verify the amount. You'll get every cent you're owed. I forwarded the email to Lin Jing after reading it. In my work email, Claire Jo sent an update on the new NATO project. The NATO Defense Committee will visit NATO headquarters tomorrow afternoon to hear the proposal. Mr. Noah, you'll be the lead presenter. I replied, got it. The next afternoon, I stood in the NATO headquarters presentation hall with the new Star Shield architecture diagram on the big screen. NATO representatives sat in the front row. I didn't mention the base or Elena. I only talked about the system, disaster recovery, security, scalability, and real-world deployment. When the presentation ended, Claire Jo led the applause and said, "Mr. Noah, now we finally know what a true lead architect really means." As the applause rang out, my phone buzzed. Elena sent a photo of an old base promotional poster on which my name was absent. She followed it with a message, "I just realized I lost you a long time ago." I glanced at it and placed the phone face down on the table. In the presentation hall, a new contract was already placed before me. I picked up the pen. This time, only my name appeared in the signature line. After news spread that NATO had chosen the Starshield system, the base was in turmoil. Military top brass placed all the pressure on Elena. She began formally cleaning up the mess Marcus had left behind, but by then Marcus had gone mad. Knowing he couldn't stay at the base, he wanted to drag everyone down with him. On the third night, an internal test environment from the base was suddenly leaked to the external network. An unfinished version of the Aegis system demo package contained many erroneous interfaces, which was even more deadly. The file package included a forged note claiming it was core code source backup from Noah White before his reassignment. This time, Marcus aimed to seal the deal against me. If this material were confirmed authentic, I wouldn't just face a job-hopping controversy, I'd be suspected of leaking military secrets. NATO's legal team immediately initiated a formal response. Claire asked me, "Have you seen this demo package before?" I glanced at the file hash value and replied, "Yes, I have." Her eyes darkened. I continued, "This is the version after Marcus replaced the security module. I never touched it." I opened my computer and pulled up the archival records from the day I was transferred out of the base. I had already frozen my account before the transfer. The generation time of this demo package is 6 hours after my account was frozen. Claire nodded and said, "That's enough." I replied, "Not quite." I opened another backup file stored long ago. Marcus thought deleting surface logs would cover his tracks, but the Aegis system has an underlying invisible audit chain I wrote in the early days, known only to me and the legal team. Claire looked at me and asked, "You left an audit chain?" At the base, it's not a backdoor, it's a tamper-proof log. I exported the complete records. Operator, Marcus Brent. Operation time, 12:42 a.m. On the day of the transfer. Operation content, package the demo environment, modify the documentation, and send it to a personal cloud drive. Then another record followed. Operator, Hammond. Operation content, assisted in extracting the computer image from Noah White's old workstation. I stared at Hammond's name, my gaze turning cold. He's not a technical person. He couldn't have finished the packaging work alone, yet he could grant Marcus administrative access. That single access record was more than enough evidence to hold them accountable. The next morning, an internal accountability meeting was held at the base. I was invited to attend. This time, the venue was not the small command conference room, but the base's huge main auditorium. The scandal could no longer be hidden, so the technical team, HR, legal team, and senior military officials were all required to be present. Elena stood on the stage, looking exhausted, but far calmer than in the past few chaotic days. Marcus sat in the audience, accompanied by a military legal counsel assigned to him. Hammond was also seated among the staff, keeping his head down the entire time without daring to look up. Once the meeting began, Marcus struck first to shift blame. He stood up and spoke loudly. "I admit there were issues with project management, but the leak of the demo package has nothing to do with me. As the original architect, Noah White knows the system best. He has the ability to bypass permissions." I sat in the front row, unmoved, and listened quietly to his fabricated accusations. He continued. "Now he's with NATO, and NATO has also shifted to Starshield. Who benefits the most? Isn't it him?" Murmurs of doubt spread through the audience. Elena looked straight at me from the stage. I stood up and walked slowly to the stage, wasting no extra words as I projected 3 key pieces of evidence onto the big screen. First item, the official account freezing record, signed by legal and stamped by HR, with clear timestamps. Second item, the demo package creation timestamp, falling long after my account was locked. Third item, the complete underlying audit chain showing Marcus's private cloud drive address, packaging path, modified notes, and exact file timestamps. All irrefutable proof laid out clearly on screen. Marcus jumped up in panic. "Impossible. That log he cut himself off mid-sentence, but it was already too late." The entire auditorium had caught his slip of the tongue. Elena closed her eyes tightly in despair. Susie Yuan, the lead legal officer, spoke directly. Marcus Brent, we will record what you just said as official testimony. Marcus's face turned ashen white. I looked straight at him. You deleted the surface-level logs, didn't you? His lips trembled violently without a word of defense. I said, you only erased the visible logs. The underlying audit chain is hard-coded into the system's core. It's not designed to guard against outside hackers, but to prevent internal personnel from tampering with data. I turned to Hammond beside Marcus. Director Hammond, why does your administrative authorization appear in the computer image extraction record? Hammond's face turned white as paper, stammering nonstop. I just followed Major Marcus's instructions to assist the investigation. I pulled up the full chat logs between Hammond and Marcus. Marcus, pull the image of Noah White's workstation computer ASAP. Hammond, without Colonel Carter's or legal approval, won't there be procedural issues? Marcus, Colonel Carter hates him the most right now. What are you afraid of? If anything happens, I'll take the fall. The auditorium erupted in shocked uproar. Elena stood frozen on the stage, her face drained of all color. She finally realized that her most trusted adjutant hadn't only deceived me, but had lied to her all along. Marcus struggled desperately to fight back against the evidence. These chat logs aren't complete. Noah White, if you have the guts, explain your relationship with Colonel Carter, too. Dare you claim you didn't use the marriage for your own gain? I looked at him and suddenly found his pathetic scheme laughable. He still foolishly thought our marriage was my vulnerable weakness to exploit. I pulled out the final critical document from my folder. This is the prenuptial agreement between Elena Carter and me. The big screen lit up with its clauses. Separate property, separate technology assets. If either party serves on the base after marriage, military rank and salary are individually calculated per official military standards. Everyone in the room fell into complete silence. I said, I never took a single cent of base resources by relying on this marriage. On the contrary, the base still owes me unpaid authorization revenue and delayed project bonuses. I glanced toward the stage. Colonel Carter, you personally signed this agreement 5 years ago. Elena's voice was barely audible. Yes. Marcus was completely speechless with no more lies to tell. Susie Yuan announced the official verdict on the spot. Marcus Brent is suspected of forging documents, maliciously leaking base test packages, and embezzling project bonuses. The base will transfer the full case to military judicial proceedings. Hammond is suspended pending a thorough internal investigation. As military legal personnel stepped forward to take Marcus into custody, he suddenly shook them off and rushed toward Elena on the stage. Elena, I did all this for you. Don't forget, you were the one who said, we can't let the commander think the base can't do without Noah White. This reckless sentence hit the room like a bomb. Everyone's gaze instantly locked onto Elena standing alone on the stage. She stood there, her face pale and lifeless. I didn't spare her a glance, for this hidden insecurity of hers was never a secret to me. Marcus had only spoken aloud the thought she had buried deep inside for years. Elena's voice trembled uncontrollably. I was afraid of being questioned by the military, but I never asked you to frame him. Marcus laughed bitterly in desperation. You didn't say it, but you tacitly agreed to all my actions. The lecture hall fell into an eerie, suffocating silence. I packed up my laptop, ready to leave. This accountability session had dragged on far longer than necessary. I walked slowly off the stage toward the exit. Elena suddenly chased after me, calling my name. Noah, she stood behind me, her voice breaking with suppressed tears. I admit I was wrong. I knew you were the core talent of the base. I was just afraid of seeming useless in front of superiors and subordinates alike. I was scared people would say, the base relies on you, not me. I thought keeping you in the shadows would protect the project and protect our marriage. I turned around to face her. You were only protecting your own fragile pride. Fresh tears fell from her eyes without pause. I said, and I paid for that pride with my professional reputation, my dignity, my marriage, and 7 whole years of my life. She couldn't utter a single word in response. I turned and walked out of the lecture hall without another glance backward. Behind me, Marcus was still shouting Elena's name as legal staff escorted him away. This time, Elena paid no attention to his cries. She kept staring at my departing back, yet I never once looked back at her. After Marcus was taken away for judicial processing, the base fell quiet for several days. Public opinion across the military internet had completely reversed its stance toward me. The base issued an official public announcement admitting major management errors in the Skydome system project. It formally acknowledged Lieutenant Colonel Noah White as the project's core architect. The statement also admitted improper project credit attribution and unfair bonus distribution practices, and announced the permanent removal of Major Marcus Brent from staff duty while reserving full rights to pursue military judicial accountability against him. After the official release of the announcement, many colleagues reached out to apologize to me. Co-workers who once mocked me for living off my wife in the staff break room sent lengthy apology messages. High-ranking generals who had repeatedly cut me off during technical briefings sent their secretaries over to deliver personal notes clearing up misunderstandings. Mrs. Carter also tried to call me multiple times, but I never picked up. She left a long voice message on my voicemail. I opened it out of curiosity, and the first sound I heard was her sobbing. Noah, Auntie was stubborn and harsh before, but all my words were only for Elena's sake. I deleted the voice message immediately after listening. Some belated apologies carry no real repentance behind them. They only come when the speaker realizes they chose the wrong person to bully all along. Elena reached out to request a private meeting with me. The location was the old startup park where we first rented our tiny shared office years ago. I did not want to meet her at first, but my lawyer Lin Jing reminded me she still hasn't signed the divorce papers. Go wants to settle all loose ends clearly. So I agreed to the meeting. That old office building still stood intact, yet the convenience store downstairs where we used to buy meals had changed its brand sign completely. 5 years ago, Elena would always buy rice balls there for our late-night work shifts. When I arrived at the entrance of the building, she was already waiting for me. She wore a plain light gray coat with no heavy formal makeup, looking exhausted and haggard. She looked at me and said softly, "Do you still remember this place?" I said, "Yes." She smiled a bitter, tired smile. "Back then, we had nothing at all." "No." I looked straight into her eyes. "Back then, at the very least, we had complete trust in each other." Her eyes instantly reddened with tears. We walked together into the old building. The office at the far end of the third floor had already been rented to another unrelated company. Cardboard moving boxes piled by the door, and new corporate slogans covered the original walls. Elena paused in the empty hallway, her voice soft and uncertain. Could we really start to change everything between us now? I did not give her an immediate answer. She continued, "Maybe it all began during our first NATO coordination meeting. A senior military officer said to my face, 'The real core value of this base is him, not you.' He said, if he chooses to transfer elsewhere, the base's annual technical assessment scores will drop by at least half." She lowered her head and let out a faint, sorrowful laugh. It stung deeply at the time. I worked just as hard day and night, yet everyone only noticed your outstanding technical skills. I looked at her calmly. "So, you began deliberately downplaying my existence to others." She closed her eyes in admission. "Yes." She finally voiced the truth she had hidden for years. "I told myself it was necessary for project balance. The commander must not think technology overrides military command authority, and lower-level staff must not assume I only hold rank by riding on my husband's coattails. I also foolishly convinced myself you would never care about these empty honorary titles." I said, "I truly didn't care about fame or titles at the very beginning." Fresh tears streamed down her cheeks. But I took it all too far as time went on. I did not argue against her statement. She pulled a thick stack of official documents out of her handbag. "This is the recalculated authorized operating income and overdue project bonuses owed to you by the base, totaling €376 million. Every single amount has been fully audited and approved by senior military command. The full sum will be deposited into your designated account within 3 working days." I took the documents and flipped through each page briefly. "I'll pass all these financial settlement materials directly to my legal team for processing." She nodded, then pulled out a second document, the divorce agreement, fully signed by her hand already. Her fingers trembled as she pushed the paper toward me. "The apartment, the car, all joint savings accumulated during our marriage, I will abide by every clause written in the agreement. Whatever compensation you are legally entitled to, I will never delay payment for any reason." I picked up the agreement from her hands. "Thanks for cooperating with the formal separation process." Those 4 plain words stabbed straight through her heart. She lifted her head to stare at me, her eyes broken and hollow. "Is cooperation all we have left between us now?" I did not respond to her question. She suddenly stepped forward a small distance toward me. "Noah, I know I have no right to ask you to come back to me. I just want to ask, if I started changing from this moment onward. If I erased every trace Marcus left behind at the base, if I publicly acknowledged to every commander and subordinate that you are the true core of the base. If I cut her off mid-sentence. Elena Carter, she fell silent instantly. I looked at her and spoke word by word. Every single thing you just listed is responsibility you should have fulfilled a long time ago. It cannot count as compensation to me. It is only overdue justice. Her face turned completely pale at my words. I continued, justice that arrives far too late can never be a reason for me to turn back to the old life. Tears silently streamed down her face without stopping. A few random passers-by walked through the hallway and glanced at us out of quiet curiosity. She seemed to finally stop caring about maintaining her perfect public image in front of strangers. She whispered faintly, I once truly loved you. I nodded gently. I loved you too once. A tiny flicker of hope lit up in her eyes for a split second, yet I kept speaking without pause. But loving you does not mean I have to keep draining my own dignity and self-worth for your peace of mind. That faint glimmer of hope in her eyes faded away completely. She lowered her head and tightly clutched the strap of her handbag. Are you already romantically involved with Claire Jo from NATO? I frowned slightly. This matter has absolutely nothing to do with her. She gave a bitter, self-deprecating smile. I know that much. I only need to find some excuse to convince myself that you are not leaving me simply because I am unworthy of you. I looked at her steadily. I am leaving because I have finally admitted to myself that you could never bring yourself to give me the equal respect I deserve. She fell completely silent with nothing left to say. I turned to walk away, clutching the signed divorce agreement in my hand. When I reached the stairwell landing, she suddenly called out my full name. Noah White, I'm sorry. This time, I paused my footsteps. I accept your apology. She lifted her head hoping for more, yet I did not turn back to face her. But I cannot accept a fresh start with you. With that line, I walked down the stairwell alone. The sunlight outside the building was bright and blinding. I placed the divorce agreements safely in my car, then sent a short text message to Lin Jing. You can begin filing all divorce legal paperwork immediately. He replied within seconds, finally. I stared at those two simple words and let out a soft smile. Yeah, finally. The divorce legal process moved forward quickly without any delays. Elena did not drag out the proceedings or raise unreasonable counter-demands. At the entrance of the Civil Affairs Bureau, she stood wearing a plain white trench coat, holding her official divorce certificate in one hand. I held an identical thin red-covered booklet as well. Yet holding this paper felt as though 5 years of heavy weight had been lifted entirely off my chest. She glanced over at me. If any work-related trouble arises between you and the base in the future. I cut her off gently. Direct all such matters to my legal representative. She gave another bitter smile. You won't even spare me a single polite friendly word now. I looked at her calmly. Empty polite words would only give you false hope of reconciliation. Her eyes reddened once more. It seemed these days she was making up for every tear she had refused to shed over our 5 years together. But I no longer stopped my steps or softened my stance for her tears. Outside the Civil Affairs Bureau, Lin Jing waited beside my car holding a thick document bag. When he saw me walk out, he lifted the bag to show me. The first installment payment from the base has been transferred successfully. The remaining 2 installments will arrive on schedule. I nodded in acknowledgement. Elena overheard our conversation and spoke softly from behind me. I will personally monitor the senior military brass to ensure you receive every owed cent without delay. I said simply, thank you. She opened her mouth as if she wanted to say more, yet only managed a quiet phrase. Take care of yourself. I got into the driver's seat of my car. As we drove away from the curb, I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw her standing alone far behind us, small and distant. It felt as though I had finally left her trapped permanently in my past. NATO's new Star Shield project advanced at a rapid pace. After the NATO Defense Committee formally signed the multi-year cooperation contract, NATO established an exclusive independent technical team reporting directly to me. For the first time in my 7 years of system development work, I held full independent decision-making power over every aspect of the project. No longer had to wait for superiors to approve whether my name could appear on official documents. No longer had to fear being labeled overly emotional every time I pointed out critical hidden system risks to leadership. 3 months later, the official Star Shield platform launch event was scheduled at the Brussels Conference Center. The day before the grand launch, Claire Jo forwarded me the finalized event agenda. Speaker, Noah White. Technical lead, Noah White. Core architecture credit, Noah White's team. I stared at those clear lines on the screen for a long while without moving my fingers. Chen Rui sent me a private work message that evening. He had already resigned from the base and joined my NATO project team. Brother Noah, I will take full charge of all back-end support work tomorrow. 0 operational errors guaranteed. I replied briefly, thanks. He sent a smiling emoji afterward. Finally, I get to work openly under your lead without having to hide in the background. On the day of the launch event, the venue was packed full of clients, international media reporters, and industry partners. I waited backstage and heard the host announce my name to the crowd. Next up, we have NATO Joint Defense Bureau's Chief System Architect, Mr. Noah White. Warm applause echoed throughout the hall as I walked onto the main stage. The bright spotlight focused entirely on me, yet I felt no trace of nervousness. The complete Star Shield platform architecture diagram slowly unfolded across the huge central screen. I picked up the microphone to begin my presentation. Hello, everyone. I'm Noah White. The NATO representatives seated in the front row led the sustained applause, and Claire Jo sitting nearby nodded at me in silent encouragement. I began walking through every module, every data link, every disaster recovery logic design with crystal clear detail. This time, no one rushed to snatch my laser pointer halfway through my speech. No one edited my name off official slides. No one stepped beside me to say, Lieutenant Colonel Noah, you only handle supplementary minor technical details. After the full demonstration concluded, warm applause lingered for a long time without fading. Once the formal launch segment ended, media reporters surrounded me for interviews. A reporter asked, Mr. White, the public is aware you endured serious workplace controversies at your former military base in the past. Now you stand at the forefront launching a brand new independent platform. Is there anything you wish to share? I looked straight into the live news camera lens. Technology itself never betrays the people who build it. I paused for a beat. But human beings often do betray one another. So when designing stable systems, you must build an unalterable audit trail. When navigating real life, you must set firm, uncrossable personal boundaries. Some audience members laughed lightly, while others sat quietly deep in thought. After all media interviews wrapped up, I spotted Elena standing at the far end of the lounge hallway. She did not walk forward to approach me, only remained standing alone there. She looked far thinner than our last meeting, and she came completely unaccompanied by assistants or drivers. I walked over to her, and she spoke first before I could open my mouth. The launch event was an enormous success. Congratulations to you. She offered a faint gentle smile. I listened to your entire presentation from the audience seating area. You were always meant to stand center stage like this. I offered no verbal response to her words. She pulled an old worn notebook out of her shoulder bag. This is something you left at our shared apartment years ago. I found it while sorting through leftover moving boxes recently, and I brought it to return to you. I took the notebook from her hands. It was my 7-year-old original Skydome manuscript, with a tiny sun doodle Elena drew on the cover corner long ago. She said softly, I have wanted to return this to you for a very long time, yet I was always too afraid to seek you out alone. I said simply, thank you. She stared at me as if she carried countless unspoken words weighing on her heart. Finally, she only asked one quiet question. Are you truly at peace and happy with your life now? I thought for a short moment. I am at peace with everything. She nodded slowly, that is good news for you. We stood side by side in silent neutrality, the atmosphere neither awkward nor warm and intimate. We were simply two people who had fully walked to the end of a shared old path. She spoke again after the pause. Marcus's criminal trial will commence next month. Hammond has received a permanent industry blacklisting ban. The base's senior organizational management team has also undergone full restructuring. I have formally resigned from my colonel military rank position entirely. A flicker of genuine surprise crossed my face. She caught my shocked expression and gave a faint small smile. This choice is not an attempt to soften your stance toward me. I have simply realized many titles and positions I once clung to desperately were never what I truly wanted out of life. I said, then I sincerely hope you can find whatever genuine fulfillment you seek. Her eyes turned misty red once again. Noah, you have changed so much over these months. I nodded in agreement. Everyone must grow and change as life moves forward. She did not bring up the possibility of reconciliation between us again, nor repeat hollow apologies for past mistakes. She simply stepped sideways to clear the hallway path for me to pass through. "Go on to finish your work, Mr. Noah." This time, she addressed me formally as Mr. Noah. Her tone held no hidden sarcasm about social status, only a belated, sincere measure of respect she had never given me before. I clutched the old manuscript notebook in my hands and walked into the staff break room. Her footsteps faded quietly down the hallway behind me, and I never turned back to glance at her figure. 6 months later, the full Star Shield platform officially went live for global operation. NATO successfully secured 3 long-term strategic international cooperation projects built entirely on this system framework. My technical team expanded rapidly from an initial 15 core members to a stable 60-person full-scale department. Chen Rui was promoted to head of the overall architecture subteam. At every internal team meeting, he placed all potential risk analysis slides at the very start of each presentation deck. He once explained to the whole team, "I learned this core principle from Brother Noah. If you fail to flag all foreseeable risks in advance, system failures and accidents will force everyone to confront them later anyway." I teased him lightly for picking up my work habits so quickly. That evening, NATO hosted a grand project celebration banquet. Claire Jo raised her wineglass toward me across the table and spoke warmly. "Noah White, congratulations. You have finally brought yourself back into the light you deserve." I lifted my own glass to clink against hers. "We achieved all of this success together as a team." She smiled and shook her head playfully. "You can speak of teamwork generously, but do not try to pass all the credit to the rest of us." I grinned and agreed with her light-hearted remark. After the celebration banquet ended late at night, I received a short email sent directly from Elena Carter. The subject line held only one single word: "Congratulations." The body text was equally brief and restrained. I saw all the official news covering Starshield's successful global launch. "Congratulations, Noah. I once foolishly believed your quiet, reserved nature meant you had no need for public recognition or respect. Now I finally understand, every person deserves to be seen and valued for their work. I hope every part of your future path moves smoothly without further obstacles." I read through the full message once, then closed the email without typing a reply. It was not out of lingering resentment toward her. Replying simply held no necessary purpose anymore. Elena later tendered her full resignation from military base service and joined an international non-profit technology foundation. Some former base colleagues claimed she had been pressured to leave by top military brass after the scandal. Others argued she had finally grown tired of a life centered around military ranks, power struggles, and constant win-lose competition. Neither version of the story mattered to my life any longer. On the day Marcus's court verdict was finalized, Lin Jing forwarded the official judgment documents to my inbox. He was ordered to pay full financial compensation and bear formal criminal liability on multiple charges: attempted military secret leakage, falsification of official documents, and military defamation against me. Hammond received a 3-year permanent industry blacklist barring him from all military and defense-related administrative work. Mrs. Carter called my personal number several times afterward, yet I never answered a single ring. She later sent a middleman to relay a request for an in-person apology meeting. I instructed Lin Jing to send a formal written reply. There is no need for any meeting. Not every belated apology deserves to be acknowledged or accepted. When winter arrived that year, I moved into my own new private residence. The house was not overly large, yet every piece of furniture and decor had been personally chosen by me alone. The study room faces a wide window with an unobstructed view of snow-covered city scenery outside. I placed the old 7-year-old manuscript notebook on the top shelf of my bookcase. I kept it not to hold on to lingering feelings for Elena, but as a quiet personal reminder. You may freely give your care, effort, and affection out of love, yet you must never hand over your self-respect and dignity for others to keep safe. One quiet winter evening, Chen Rui came over to my new house for dinner. As he glanced at the line of achievement trophies lined on my bookcase shelf, he suddenly brought up an old memory. "Brother Noah, I still clearly remember the day Colonel Carter stormed into the technical team office furious." My hand paused mid-pour as I filled his teacup with hot tea. He continued recounting the scene. She shouted, "He was recruited for an €800,000 annual salary, and none of you dared tell me about it." That was the exact moment I fully realized it was not that she did not recognize how vital your work was to the base. She simply took your consistent kindness and reliability for granted, convinced you would never choose to walk away from her side. I set the filled teacup down in front of him on the table. "A great many people think exactly like that." "What do you mean?" They are not unaware of how valuable and capable you are. They merely treat your consistent goodwill toward them as an unlimited free resource that will never run out no matter how they take advantage of it. Chen Rui sat silent for a long moment after hearing my words, then nodded slowly in agreement. It is a good thing you chose to leave the base back then. I offered a faint quiet smile. Yes, it truly was the right choice for me. That night, soft snowflakes drifted down outside my living room window. I stepped out onto the balcony and stood watching countless city lights flicker on one by one across the distant skyline. My phone vibrated repeatedly with new messages from the NATO team workgroup chat. Everyone discussed details of the next system version iteration, upcoming international client cooperation plans, and year-end performance bonus distribution arrangements. One teammate tagged me in a message. Mr. Noah, we need your final call on the core architecture direction for next week's design meeting. I typed a single-word reply and sent it, okay. After sending the message, I powered my phone fully off and set it aside. Faint echoes of voices from my distant past seemed to drift through my mind for a fleeting second. Mrs. Carter calling me rude and ungrateful. Marcus claiming I only advanced professionally by leveraging my marriage ties. Elena accusing me of lacking grace and being overly stubborn. But now, I no longer carried the heavy burden of having to prove my worth and respectability to any of those people. All financial debts the base owed me had been fully settled in compliance with legal agreements. All future commercial licensing terms for the Starshield system were renegotiated and signed under a brand new independent commercial contract, with pricing fully determined by my legal team's valuation. My new NATO project progressed steadily without hidden interference or credit theft. I possessed my own independent team, my name printed prominently on every official project deliverable, and complete freedom to make my own professional choices. I was no longer defined solely as someone's husband, a disposable subordinate accessory, or a last-minute emergency troubleshooter. No longer the person forced to wait through 32 ignored phone calls begging for someone to listen to vital safety warnings. The following morning, I attended the annual International Defense Technology Forum. The event host stepped to the podium to introduce me formally. Mr. Noah White, Chief System Architect of the NATO Joint Defense Bureau, core lead designer for the Starshield platform. I walked up the steps onto the main presentation stage. Many familiar faces filled the audience seating area, including several former base staff members who now looked at me with entirely different eyes compared to our past encounters. I stood behind the podium and opened my presentation slide deck. The very first slide contained only a single short sentence printed in bold font: truly stable systems always have clear, uncrossable boundaries. The entire audience fell into complete silent contemplation after reading that line. I stared steadily at the words for a brief instant, and suddenly recalled that lonely night of the 32 unanswered phone calls. I had stood alone in the base's underground parking garage back then, utterly convinced I had lost everything meaningful in my life. Now I understood clearly that moment was never a true ending. It was merely the starting point where my own personal boundaries finally took full effect in my life. I picked up the podium microphone, my voice calm and steady without any trace of hesitation. Hello, everyone. I'm Noah White. The NATO representatives in the front row led the applause, and Claire Jo, sitting nearby, nodded at me. I began the demonstration. Every module, every link, every disaster recovery logic was crystal clear. This time, no one snatched my laser pointer. No one deleted my name. No one stood beside me saying, "Lieutenant Colonel Noah, you handle the supplementary details." After the demonstration, the applause lingered for a long time. After the launch, the media interviewed me. A reporter asked, "Mr. White, the public knows you faced some controversies at the base in the past. Now, returning to the forefront with a new platform, is there anything you'd like to say?" I looked into the camera. Technology doesn't betray people. I paused. But people do. So, when building systems, you need an audit trail. When living your life, you need boundaries. Some in the audience laughed, while others fell silent. After the interview, I saw Elena at the door of the lounge. She didn't come in, just stood at the end of the hallway. She looked much thinner than the last time we met, and she had no assistant with her. I walked over, and she spoke first. The launch was a great success. Thank you. She smiled. I listened through the whole thing from the audience. You were always meant to be up there. I didn't respond. She pulled an old notebook from her bag. This is something you left at home years ago. I found it while moving things. It was the manuscript. From 7 years ago when I wrote the first version of Skydome with a little sun drawn by Elena in the corner of the cover. She said softly, "I've always wanted to return it to you, but I was afraid you wouldn't see me." I said, "Thank you." She looked at me as if she had so much to say. Finally, she only asked, "Are you happy now?" I thought for a moment, at peace. She nodded, "That's good." We fell into silence, neither awkward nor intimate. Like two people who had finally walked through an old path to its end. She said, "Marcus's case goes to trial next month. Hammond has been reported to the industry. The organization's top management has also been restructured. I resigned from my colonel position." I was a bit surprised. She saw my shock and smiled slightly. "It's not to soften you up. I just realized many of the things I used to cling to so desperately aren't really what I want." I said, "Then I hope you find what you truly want." Her eyes turned red. "Noah, you've really changed." I nodded, "People have to change." She didn't bring up getting back together again, nor did she say, "I'm sorry." She simply stepped aside to let me pass. "Go ahead with your work, Mr. Noah." This time, she called me Mr. Noah, and in her tone, there was no irony about status, only a belated respect. Holding my notebook, I walked into the break room. Her footsteps faded behind me, and I didn't look back. 6 months later, the Starshield platform officially launched. NATO secured 3 strategic cooperation projects using the system, and my team expanded from 15 to 60 people. Chen Rui became the head of the architecture team, and at every meeting, he would put risk on the first page of his slides. He said, "I learned this from Brother Noah. If you don't call out risks in advance, accidents will do it for you." I teased him for catching on so fast. That evening was NATO's celebration banquet. Claire Jo raised her glass to me and said, "Noah White, congratulations. You've brought yourself back." I lifted my cup. "We achieved this together." She smiled, "You can say that, but don't let me take the credit." I grinned, too. After the celebration banquet ended, I received an email from Elena Carter. The subject line was simple: "Congratulations." The body was also very brief. I saw the news about Starshield going live. "Congratulations, Noah. I used to think your silence meant you didn't need to be seen. Now I understand. No one doesn't need to be respected. I hope everything goes smoothly for you from now on." I read it, but didn't reply. Not out of resentment, it just wasn't necessary. Elena later left the base and joined a non-profit technology foundation. Some said she was forced out by the military brass. Others said she finally didn't want to live in the world of rank and winning or losing anymore. None of that had anything to do with me. The day Marcus's case was decided, Lin Jing sent me the result. He was ordered to pay compensation and bear criminal liability for attempted leaking of military secrets, document forgery, and military defamation. Hammond was blacklisted from the industry for 3 years. Mrs. Carter called me a few times, but I never answered. She later sent someone to say she wanted to apologize in person. I had Lin Jing reply, "No need. Not every belated apology deserves to be accepted." When winter came, I moved into my new home. Not big, but everything in it was chosen by me. The study faces the window with a view of the snow outside. I placed that old notebook on the top shelf of the bookcase. Not to remember Elena, but to remind myself you can give for love, but you can't hand over your dignity for safekeeping. One day, Chen Rui came over for dinner. Looking at the trophies on the bookcase, he suddenly said, "Brother Noah, I still remember the day Colonel Carter stormed into the tech team." My hand paused as I poured tea. He continued, "She asked, you were poached for 800,000. Why didn't anyone tell me?" That's when I realized it wasn't that she didn't know you mattered. She just always thought you wouldn't leave. I set the teacup in front of him. A lot of people are like that. They don't not know you're good. They just think your kindness to them is a free resource that never expires. Chen Rui was silent for a long time, then nodded. "Good thing you left." I smiled slightly. "Yeah, good thing." That night, snow fell outside the window. I stood on the balcony, watching the city lights flicker on one by one. On my phone, the NATO team group chat was still buzzing. They were discussing the next version, new clients, and year-end bonuses. Someone messaged me, "Mr. Noah, next week's architecture meeting. Your call on the direction." I replied with a single word, "Okay." After sending the message, I turned off my phone. The voices from the past seemed to linger in the distance. Mrs. Carter said I had no manners. Marcus claimed I climbed the ladder through marriage. Elena accused me of lacking grace. But now, I no longer have to prove to anyone whether I'm worthy. The debt my base owed me has been settled. And the subsequent licensing for the celestial system has been re-signed under a commercial agreement, priced by my legal team. The new NATO project is on track. I have my own team, my own name on the work, my own choices. I am no longer someone's husband, someone's appendage, someone's trump card, no longer a firefighter on call after 32 ignored calls. The next morning, I attended the International Defense Technology Forum. The host introduced me, Mr. Noah White, Chief System Architect of the NATO Joint Defense Bureau, core lead for the Starshield platform. I walked up to the stage, and in the audience sat many familiar faces, including people from the base, looking at me with entirely different eyes than before. I stood at the podium, opened my presentation, and the first slide had only one sentence. Truly stable systems always have boundaries. The audience fell silent. I stared at that line, suddenly recalling the night of the 30-second unanswered call, when I stood in the base's underground parking lot, feeling like I had lost everything. Now I realized that was not an ending. It was the beginning of boundaries finally taking effect. I picked up the microphone, my voice steady. Hello, everyone. I'm Noah White. Applause followed. This time, I didn't look for Elena Carter in the audience, nor did I care who had misunderstood me before. I only looked forward because my life, after those 32 calls, has been reconnected.